Hi, I'm Josh Meny. Welcome to this edition of Missoula Current. You are watching Missoula Community Access Television. The program we have today is a special program about the Poverello Center in Missoula, Montana, and I'm really pleased to have Eran Fowler, Executive Director here. Eran, how are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Great. So to start out, the Poverello Center, you're going to have a new center, right? You're building a new center. Um, Tell us a little bit about this.
Yes, so the Poverello Center has been working, for about the last 6 years on relocating our homeless shelter and soup kitchen. We've been working in earnest about the last 3 years, and so we are currently located in a boarding house that was built in the late 1800s and was just really never designed to serve as a homeless shelter and soup kitchen. We've really just grown beyond the capacity to operate there. So we recently purchased a piece of property on West Broadway, and we're in the process of preparing that site for construction. We've demolished the old buildings that operate out of that, or that resided on that site, and we're making way to break ground in August.
Great. So tell us, a lot of people know that the Poverello Center is a shelter, and it also offers, as you said, a soup kitchen. Tell us what other services that the Poverello offers that some people in Missoula may not know about.
Well, our essential services, which is really our founding mission, is to provide food and shelter to people who are living in homelessness and poverty in Missoula. Over the course of the years, the last really 4 decades that we've been open, we recognized that sometimes that isn't enough to help folks move beyond their current situation. So we've added several programs in that span. At our Ryman Street facility, in addition to food and shelter, we also offer lots of supportive day services. Sometimes things as simple as access to internet, phone, and mail for people to get employment and housing. We also offer case management, resource and referral, so we can connect people to the resources in the community that they'll need to change their situation. We also operate the community's homeless veterans program. So about 30% of the people who stay with us are folks who are discharged from the armed forces and have fallen into homelessness. So we provide support services and overnight shelter to veterans in that capacity. And then we also opened, in about the last 6 years, 2 supportive housing programs in collaboration with the Missoula Housing Authority to provide a longer-term solution to homelessness. And those programs are the Joseph Residence and McClay Commons, in addition to the Valor House. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention our homeless outreach teams as well. They provide real-time on-the-street intervention to Missoula's most chronically homeless men and women. That group of individuals is a relatively small subset of the total amount of homeless people that we serve. It's about 11% of the homeless population in Missoula. However, they can be the most visible because sometimes they display the most problematic behaviors. And so the goal of our homeless outreach teams is to work with them, to connect them to services, and then also try to mitigate problematic behaviors so we can have a safer, more enjoyable downtown for everybody.
Great. So with the new Poverello Center, are you going to be offering any new programs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're actually really excited to continue to provide our essential services, food and shelter, and then really expand our capacity to support people. When you have the space to provide additional programming, you can really address needs in a way that we can't right now. So our new facility will serve veterans better by providing 26 semi-private beds for veterans who are experiencing homelessness. We have a lot of younger veterans who are returning from the current combat and falling into homelessness, and it's been really problematic for them to come and sleep in communal dorms with very tight constraints. A lot of those young men and women are struggling with PTSD and traumatic brain injuries, and they really need private spaces to feel safe and to recover. And so we'll have those private beds for veterans through our collaboration with the Veteran Administration, and we're thrilled about that. We'll also have medical respite rooms, which we don't currently have now. We're serving more and more women who are exiting hospital care, inpatient care, and have lost their housing during that period of time. It may be long-term illnesses and a hospice situation, folks who have end-stage cancer, terminal illnesses, and become homeless and really are being discharged to the streets. We also want to be able to act as a step down for folks who are in the hospital but don't really need to be. Perhaps it's a simple wound care issue, but because they don't have a clean, dry, safe environment to discharge to, they're kept in the hospital longer than they need to, which costs all of us a tremendous amount of money. So we'll have 8 medical respite beds in the new facility to serve that growing need. And then our day services will expand as well. We'll have an educational classroom with computer labs and where we can invite all of our outside service providers to come in and help the individuals staying with us develop their educational skills, vocational skills, really look at what their next step is. And then lastly, we'll have an expanded Partnership Health Center, Healthcare for the Homeless Clinic. Partnership Health Center currently operates out of our Ryman facility in a very small single exam room. In the new facility, we will expand that to 2 exam rooms and a waiting room, which will allow them to schedule more appointments and to see more walk-ins. So we're very excited about that as well.
So what are the major causes of homelessness?
Well, really, the reasons why people fall into homelessness are really as varied as the community members that we serve. We see a lot of people who fall into homelessness because of an acute medical issue, as I mentioned before. A lot of people who are struggling with mental illness or addictions. We're seeing more and more first-time homeless, men and women who have been working in the community until they experienced a layoff. We continue to see a significant amount of youth aging out of foster care who leave group home placements or foster care placements with nowhere to go. And then lastly, one of the largest growing populations that we serve are elderly men and women who are living on very fixed incomes and trying to afford market rate rentals and just struggle to keep up and oftentimes face evictions. So there's no one nice, neat picture of what a homeless individual looks like. It really is men and women of all ages, youth, leaving foster care, and then it is folks struggling with mental illness and addiction, but it's a lot of other people too.
Have you noticed that homelessness in Missoula, has it gone up since the recession, the 2008 recession? Has it been on the upswing? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. Prior to 2009, our numbers were a little bit more steady, and we did see a dramatic spike in how many people we were serving in 2009, and that has remained consistent since then. And what we are serving now seems to be the new norm. And like I said before, it's a lot more men and women who are homeless for the first time. Many people with college degrees, with really employable skills, but just can't find housing. Or folks who take lower paying jobs than what they're used to and can't afford housing. And so homelessness, I think, has really been redefined by the recession. And we're seeing more folks that we just wouldn't have seen 5 or 6 years ago.
In 2012, Mayor Enkin proposed a 10-year plan to end homelessness in Missoula. Do you see that as a realistic goal?
I do, and I think it all depends on how you look at it. And so we know, those of us that are engaged in that effort and those of us that work with homeless men and women and families in Missoula, we know you'll never truly end homelessness because people will always fall on hard times and they'll always need the assistance of others. But the goal of the plan is to end the reality of homelessness as a long-term situation. So our community is working very hard so that when men and women, single individuals and families fall into homelessness, they are rehoused as soon as possible. And so I think we may still see folks becoming homeless, we won't see them staying homeless. And so we'll get families into housing, and we'll connect them to the resources that they need. We'll also stem the tide a bit by working more to prevent homelessness to begin with. Preventing homelessness is a lot cheaper and of course more compassionate than allowing people to fall into the shelter system and then supporting them. And so I think we look at it on both ends. How can we work to try to decrease the number of people that fall into homelessness? And then for those individuals who do still fall into homelessness, how can we get them rehoused as soon as possible? And I think what the 10-year plan will do is it will create an incredibly effective, well-functioning homeless service delivery system so that we can reach those goals on both ends.
Now, you were telling me before the show that the Poverello Center, you guys produced a documentary.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about the documentary, and then maybe we can show it.
Yeah, so we worked with a former board member, Drew Carr of High Plains Films, on helping us tell the story that is the POV. And it's such a hard thing to capture. If you've never been in the POV, I think a lot of people assume that it's a sad place and that it's a place of hopelessness, and that's simply not true. The environment and the energy of the POV is just one of such intense hope and happiness, and I think that he did an amazing job of capturing the history of the POV, why it is we need a new facility, and then telling the story of a few of the folks who access services there.
Excellent. Well, let's take a look at that documentary.
I am the POV. I am the POV.
I am the POV.
I am the POV.
I am the POV.
It's really hard to say you have a great community if there are lots of people left out of the greatness.
I think at the time before the Poverello was created, we were rather indifferent to people who were homeless.
I knew there was such a thing as a homeless shelter. I'd never been in one or didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about homelessness at that time. But I was without money, and so I came to the Poverello.
A group of people called lay Franciscans came together in prayer to try and involve their lives in the way of St. Francis of Assisi, who was a man of the poor. They became very concerned and started to make a movement to create a space where people could be fed, and then eventually where people could be housed temporarily. And they just started without any fanfare, and eventually it became what it is today.
I was a truck driver, and I got a job in eastern Montana, Culberson. I hitchhiked there. They hired me over the phone, and I've been in Montana practically ever since. Now that I've gotten older, I can't work. And I squandered my money. Hadn't it been for this place, I'd be out there. And I'm too old to be out there. It's a blessing in my book. The ones I feel for are the families. You know, I've seen kids come through here. If this place wasn't here, those kids wouldn't be eating.
I work at the POV because I believe that everybody deserves a second chance, and I believe that we can help offer hope to those people who have none. I am the POV.
The Poverello Center's emergency shelter and soup kitchen provides thousands of nights of shelter to men and women struggling with homelessness. We also serve growing numbers in our soup kitchen.
You gotta have some place to live and you gotta have something to eat. If you don't have those two things, it's really gonna be hard to put the rest of your life together. And that's where the POV fills this incredible need in the community. The hot meal is happening at the POV every afternoon and evening. The warm, tiny, hard bed in a crowded room is happening at the POV every night. There's that consistent, reliable safety net that really operates on a relative shoestring, but has made it work lo these many years. Pretty remarkable.
I served in the Navy for 6 years, and over the past 6 years, I've served veterans, young and old, here at the POV, and it's the best job I've ever had. I am the POV.
I'm like a lot of people. I think I've worked hard. I've tried to live a good life, but that is not what determines how all this plays out. As much as I'd like to think that it's, we're all self-determined, there but for the medical accident, there but for a learning disability, there but for an addiction. I just drew a whole bunch of lucky cards, and those cards can fall away at any time.
The men and women who find themselves homeless are really as varied as the community that we live in. It could be youth aging out of foster care. It is oftentimes elderly men and women who are struggling to make ends meet on Social Security retirement income. We are seeing more and more first-time homeless, people who have been working until they experienced a layoff or are struggling to find a job in the current job market. 26% of our shelter clientele are veterans of war. We're seeing more and more veterans, young veterans, return from the current conflict with significant issues and struggling to reintegrate back into the community.
I'm not a combat veteran. I served during the Cold War. But there's veterans out here who have seen action. They need help. And this is the place here for them to come to get that help if they want it.
One of the things that the POV is great at doing is helping everybody regardless of their circumstances, sort of meeting people where they are and hooking them up with the services that they need to lead a more healthy and self-reliant life.
Our homeless outreach teams focus on serving chronically homeless men and women living on the streets. While we know this is a smaller population of individuals experiencing homelessness, it's also a very important population to reach.
Our success depends on building positive relationships. But it's not about just handing out material goods. It's about having conversations to get a sense of what these folks' lives are like. And a lot of times, some of the barriers involved in folks being on the streets includes alcoholism, mental illness. Yeah, you know. People oftentimes leave institutions like a state hospital with not a lot of follow-up. I'll catch up with you again, James, okay? And so they're very challenging cases that oftentimes have fallen through the cracks. It's giving us a chance to come in and use our relationships that we've already built so that we can help figure out some better solutions down the road for the people that are on the streets.
I'm going to bring him some food today and check in on him, and I'll bring him some food.
I think one thing I've seen over the years is that the line separating people who are employed and have health insurance and have their health with people who do not and who are on the street is a very thin line, and it gets thinner all the time. The truth is, people who are homeless, who have chronic illness, die significantly earlier than the rest of us.
Partnership Health Center operates a healthcare for the homeless clinic here in the emergency shelter facility. It really allows people to address their chronic health needs.
Being able to really help people stabilize their health often involves what it would for any of us, a couple of weeks on bed rest or recovery from a surgery in a supportive, clean environment.
When clients first walk in the door, how are we going to respond to them? You know, if this is the first time that they are homeless, they're in a state of crisis and they may not be in a place where they're actually ready to go that in depth for an intake and identify what they want or need.
Ultimately, people have to be very motivated to move on to the next better possibility in their life, which typically is stable housing and employment. We require people to work hard with the case manager, to set goals and to meet those goals to reside with us.
So getting them connected with the community resources is going to be able to help them in the long run rather than just this kind of emergency situation.
People who are staying here participate in a chore, they assist in the soup kitchen and with cleaning and maintenance of the facility. That really it's a communal effort every day to serve 350 meals, to open the shelter doors to 100 individuals. And so there's a lot of give and take between residents and between the community. And our goal is to run a facility that's not just beneficial to the clients who access services here, but that provides a benefit to the entire community.
I work in the kitchen, and when we put out lunch, I want it to look beautiful. I want it to be a Kodak moment. I'm trying to talk to the residents here doing their chore that that's what I want from them so that they can take personal pride in themselves. They have lost their self-esteem, so many people. And when you're in despair and depression, you can't even come up with an idea as to how to take yourself out of this.
Even as we in Missoula work on long-term solutions to homelessness, we will always need a homeless shelter that operates with compassion and courage and high standards. And I think the POV is among the best organizations working on behalf of people most in need.
The Poverello Center has been operating out of an old boarding home that was never designed to serve as a homeless shelter and a soup kitchen, and it was especially never designed to serve the numbers that we're serving today. We're serving 100 to 120 men and women per night. Up to 20 of those individuals are sleeping on the floor. We're operating with original plumbing and original wiring, which creates significant safety risks. We really have grown beyond the ability that this facility has to serve the need in Missoula. In order to continue meeting our mission of providing safe, dignified shelter to men and women living in poverty, we need a new facility. The Poverello Center is planning to construct a right-size facility that won't be dramatically larger than the one that we have now, but that will be better designed, that will have safer, more dignified spaces. Semi-private spaces for veterans, much more dignified and safe spaces to women, better supporting people who are in need of medical respite.
When you have adequate space, you can do things like help people get their GED, help people learn how to use a computer. So the people who are ready to make change can actually be in a system that's supporting them to make that change. Everything I've seen about the new Poverello plan tells us this will dramatically change this community.
Many of us who work at the Poverello Center here do it because it's a calling for us. We come to work every day and we feel privileged to be able to walk alongside people who are experiencing tremendous struggle and who also exhibit inspirational resiliency. I think it provides me amazing perspective on why it is that we all live together on this planet and the responsibility that we have for caring for one another.
A great community doesn't exclude some of its citizens by virtue of travail. We take care of one another, and when we do, I think we're at our best. And when we're at our best, we are the POV.
Well, thanks for showing us that documentary, Eran. That was really amazing. The question that brings to my mind after watching this is, in Missoula, I've spent some time in cities that are similar size, but it seems that the homeless population is more visible here in town. Tell us about why that may be.
Yeah, I think that is it's a common observation of folks that we tend to see more homeless people in Missoula, and I think that there's the perception that we serve more homeless people here. And what we know through doing an annual point-in-time survey of homeless individuals across the state is we aren't really serving a disproportionately high number of homeless people in comparison to Billings and Kalispell and other communities. We find that nationwide, each community serves about the same amount of homeless individuals proportionate to their population. I think what perhaps is different about Missoula is that we have such a diverse and healthy and thriving downtown community. And I think that downtown area like Missoula's is attractive to everybody, which means that homeless individuals do congregate in our downtown area as opposed to some other communities which are smaller and perhaps more spread out. I think that gives people the impression that we serve more homeless individuals than we actually do.
Great. So ironically, in a way, a more visible population is a sign of a more thriving downtown.
It can be. You know, communities, I think, have a lot of hidden homeless as well. which tend to oftentimes be families, which tend to be maybe some elderly individuals or people who are couch surfing as opposed to accessing our shelter systems. I do think a lot of people get stuck on the very visible and problematic homeless population, and we just can't remind people enough that we've done some extensive studies here in Missoula, and we found that that is, again, less than 11% of our total homeless population are folks who are intoxicated, engaging in poor behavior, and oftentimes congregating in the downtown area. So it is a small population, but it's one that we're really committed to serving because we do know it impacts quality of life for everybody.
So speaking of a visible thing that's been in the news lately, the Rainbow family has been traveling through town. Tell us a little bit about how that affects the Poverello Center.
Well, you know, it actually hasn't had too much of effect on us. We have seen a few folks come in for meal services, but we haven't been serving most of those individuals in our shelter, and are told by many of them that they don't consider themselves homeless. A lot of those individuals aren't homeless. They have homes that they have come from and will go back to and are traveling for purposes of the festival. So again, the folks we've run into have been incredibly polite, those who have access to meal from time to time, but we haven't experienced a dramatic impact. I know other folks have, but we at the Poverello Center haven't really, and it is a very temporary transitional occurrence to have the festival move through Montana, and we've experienced it before in subsequent years, and we know that it'll pass.
So really quickly, can you tell us how individuals or families could get involved or volunteer at the Poverello Center?
Yeah, we're always in need of volunteers. We really are a community-run facility. We have over 900 individual volunteers who work with us every year, who serve meals, who prep food, who work in our food pantry. So we're always in need of volunteers, and they can sign up for an orientation via our website. And then, of course, we are in need of support in our campaign. We have raised $1.2 million to date and have about $500,000 left to go. And gosh, gifts don't have to be large. $5 makes a difference. And so we're eager to work with the community to get this building done.
Great. So make sure you check out their website or give the Poverello a call if you want to donate. It would help out a lot. Eran, I want to thank you for being on the program today. We really appreciate you having you on and letting the people of Missoula know what's going on with the Poverello Center and you know what misconceptions people may have about homelessness in Missoula. So thank you again for coming on to the program today.
Thanks for having me.
And I want to thank my floor manager, Director Scott Ramf, and also my technical director, Philip Christensen, for helping out with this episode of Missoula Current today. I'm Josh Meny. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to get involved or get more information on MCAT, you can call us at 542-6228, or you can go online at mcat.org. Again, I'm Josh Meny, and thank you for joining us on this episode of Missoula Current.